Hello, hello. If you are just now joining us, I think a few of you are coming in. Welcome. I'm so excited for this topic. I'm going to give everyone like maybe 30 more seconds before I ask you to drop something in the chat. Um, okay, we got enough people. In the chat, can you drop on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being absolutely terrible and 5 being spectacular? How would you rate your organization's ability to do change management? Okay. There are more people joining us, so they're seeing numbers dropped in the chat. If you are joining us and you didn't hear my scale, on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being absolutely terrible and 5 being spectacular and redefying gravity, how would you rate your company on a scale of how well they do change management? I'm loving this, but not. Ooh, someone said 4. That's the highest I've seen so far. I don't think I've seen anyone say 5. This is really fun. Thank you all for telling me how great your orgs are. Just kidding, how much help we need, because that's what we're going to do today. Okay, we're going to give everyone maybe 30 more seconds to join us, and then we'll get started with today's masterclass, which I'm very excited about. If you know nothing about me, you're about to learn a lot and also learn that I'm a nerd. So if you are just now joining us and you missed the scale, on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being terrible, 5 being spectacular, how would you rate your organization ability to do change management? Okay, we got some good answers. Hi. Okay, here we go. We're going to get started. And if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. I'm here. I'm available. I can answer them. I'm also your host. So you're in for a treat today. Who am I? I'm Hebba. I am the Chief People Officer at a company called Workweek. We are a creator-led media company. We have about 55 employees. I've worked at 4 startups across multiple industries in fintech, media, ed tech was a fun year of my life. And I love startups because they are very chaotic and need a lot of help in change management, which is something I'm very passionate about. When I'm not the CPO at Workweek, I'm also a creator. I started a brand called I Hate It Here. It has a newsletter all about workplaces and how to make them better. Don't let the word hate deter you from subscribing, because it's all about how to make work better. I also have a podcast by the same title, and I do a virtual event series called HR Therapy for HR professionals. And one last thing, a community of over 4,000 people leaders called Safe Space. It was born out of my desire to find more HR people that were struggling and that were able to talk about our problems in a real and transparent way. So if you want to join, go ahead. You can look me up and find me on the internet. When I'm not doing work stuff, because I do think work is probably one of the least interesting things about me, you can find me reading. I'm a big science fiction, fantasy, and romance reader. So if you have any book recommendations, I will always take them. I usually solicit them on LinkedIn at least once a month because I'm always looking for my next great read. Fun fact, I tend to read more fiction than nonfiction, but don't let that deter you, because I love to talk about all the business parts of the world. So what we're going to talk about today, a masterclass in change management. Before I get to that, a quick shout out to WorkVivo for putting this together and letting me yap about my favorite topic, change management. It's not the most sexy, but it is something really important that I think HR needs to be on the forefront of. So before I get to all my great content today, a quick video from them.
Introducing Workvivo, an employee experience platform. One consumer-inspired app that unifies internal communications and engagement, becoming the digital heart of your organization. Through Workvivo's feed, employees can share and follow news, videos, articles, events, podcasts, and live streams. Community spaces allow you to tailor content to specific audiences, enabling a personalized user experience and increased sense of belonging. Celebrate success and strengthen team connection through employee recognition. Bring company values to life by aligning content with culture and goals. Our smart feed keeps employees informed by pushing important content to the top. Automatic weekly digest emails ensure nobody misses out. Get to know your colleagues and see who works in each team by checking out the People directory. Gain full platform visibility through our powerful analytics tool, monitor performance, usage, and capture valuable insights through comprehensive reports. WorkVivo replaces traditional intranets and multiple communication channels. A digital workplace with seamless access to key documents and resources. One centralized hub, providing full integration with all your favorite tools. Reach all employees across multiple devices in their preferred language. So, transform your digital workplace and elevate the employee experience with WorkVivo. One platform delivering limitless human connection.
Boom. Big shout out to Workvivo for letting me talk about my favorite topic. Okay, here we go. We're going to get into it. Why we are here. I don't know if you were drawn in by the change management title. I know it's not, again, the most sexy title out there. But I really wanted to talk about this topic when I met with Workvivo and we talked about what's like the most pressing thing that HR people are feeling. It's the fact that change is happening like faster than ever before. Like we have been dealing with AI, the shift to remote work, like new tech being introduced. We're dealing with employees that have been navigating the world and their lived experience while also trying to show up best at work. And I think that change management will be the thing that sets apart companies, great companies from good companies. And at this point, change is not the norm. It's the norm, it's not the exception. I feel like all of us have felt some sort of change in the last few years that has either changed how we interact with work or how our employees interact with work. Most change efforts actually fail, and I'll dig into more about that, some really interesting stats around why some change efforts actually fail. And my last piece is I am HR by trade. I'm a CPO, and I do believe that HR is at the center of making change actually stick in your organization. It's not their only responsibility. I will say that very clearly several times. It is not their only responsibility. Everyone at the org plays a role in change management, but I do feel like if it is something that is going to impact the employees, which is a lot of changes that we make at work, that HR should be involved the earliest time possible. So that's setting the stage a little bit about why we're here. Now, what is change management really? You could have Googled it, you could have been like, I know what it is. And it's not really about a project plan or the tasks, it's getting people from your current state to a future state. And when it comes into the context of work, it's really about enabling people to adopt new ways of work. As we've seen with the introduction of AI and all of these wild technologies, and we'll get to that shortly. But it's really an organizational strategy and an individual strategy, and it's deeply personal. And the fact that change, when it happens at work, is deeply personal to people, that human side of someone, it does actually impact our business results. They've seen if employees are distracted, they'll disengage. If they're stressed out about things outside of work, it actually impacts their work. And so what we want to do as HR leaders is not create more stress for the employees, instead help guide them from our current state to our future state. And if you think about it, like a really simple example is launching a new HRIS isn't just launching a new software. It's actually teaching your employees to log into a new system. It's about changing their behaviors. It's about helping them understand why you made this change, why this is important to them. So that's just a little bit about what change management is to set the stage. And I've touched on this lately, but why it matters more than ever, you can read the slide. There are so many things that we are all experiencing in real time, from AI to hybrid work to employee expectations actually changing, where they want employers to be more transparent to build trust. There's a real change fatigue happening. Like, raise your hand, which you can't because we're all in a chat, but put in the chat if you feel like your org is experiencing any sort of change fatigue. I can tell you, I work at an early stage startup. In 3 years, we have reorged 6 times and have pivoted our strategy, I think 3 times. And that change fatigue is so real. There's a whole interesting study about resilience in the workplace. And I always talk about resilience from the frame of think about how your employees experience change. If they are great with it, if they're doing good and they're rolling with the punches, you might actually have a highly resilient organization. But that doesn't take away from the fact that it is still a very real feeling to constantly pivot and your employees to experience that. It's very scary for them. Um, Economic pressure. I don't know who has had this conversation, but we have seen a real focus on bring the cost down, increase your revenue per employee, cut all the costs possible. We've seen the news around all the layoffs. I feel like businesses now, more than ever, are feeling a real pressure to be profitable in a reasonable way. Whereas I would say 5 years ago, especially in the early stage startups, that wasn't really a focus as much. And the last is generational expectations. I've talked about this a ton. Gen Z entered the workplace. Right now, we have Gen X, Millennials, and Gen Z make up the majority of the workplace. And as new generations enter the workplace, our expectations around work actually changes. Gen Z is very digital first versus millennials that aren't as digital first because we remember a world before the internet. And so they come into the workplace with their expectations, their perceptions, their lived experiences, and that also impacts how your organization is able to make changes. So, just a little bit about why change management matters more than ever. To me personally, like I have seen organizations roll out change in a good way and in a bad way, and I have seen the outcomes of both. And I do truly believe that, like, a really great change management plan around everything you do at an organization can actually make your engagement so much higher and can help your employees understand that they are on the journey with you rather than them being pulled along by, I don't even know, their feet. I'm really bad at analogies, by the way. So, why change management matters more than ever? Now, I have to touch on this. I have to because I have read news after news article about AI, and I think right now in this moment, like if you were to talk to me in 2020, I would say the biggest catalyst for change was the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, if you're asking me in 2025, what's the biggest catalyst for change? Not that anyone asks questions like that, I would say AI because it is going to impact how we do a lot of things, like our job redesign. I don't know if anyone read the most recent article where they were talking about 20 to 30% of jobs could potentially be eliminated, but new jobs could be created. So that's one thing to think about. Skill requirements, like will AI become something that is going to be a requirement of all of our future jobs and a skill that every single person will have? The employee experience. When I think about use cases for AI, one of them that a lot of people talk about is automating tactical tasks for people to do so that your employees actually have more time to do deeper work that's like more creatively fulfilling. And then I also think AI is really going to impact our role as as HR, from being a translator as to how this is going to impact our org, to how you navigate that. Potentially you work for a company where its product, it's building AI into its product. And we also become a little bit of a mitigator. There's a lot of fear, I think, around AI and what it could do. I hear from employees all day long that they're scared that their job will disappear or that they won't have another opportunity here. And I think we as HR also sit at that center of employee sentiment around the fear of a new technology. So I want to touch on that a little bit. I know, I'm sorry you came to a virtual event about change management. Instead, you had to hear about AI. One slide, I just had to talk about it because it's going to impact our lives potentially for all time. And it's going to change our organizations potentially for the better. Maybe not. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. Wish I did though. But that's a little bit on AI and how it's shifting changes in our organization. And I put this quote in here. It's by Peter. I can't remember his last name. It starts with an S. But I thought it was important for us as we are teeing up about change management, what's impacting it, why this is happening, to talk about that people don't actually resist change. They resist being changed. And there's a real human side to change management that I think sometimes we might forget about as leaders or even HR people. And I attribute it to, like, I think a good example is like grief. I talk about this very openly. I'm somebody who has like had experienced major losses in her life and had to experience grief. And grief really goes through some stages. There's denial, there's resistance, there's like this curiosity about why this happened, how do I navigate, how am I a different person after, and eventually like acceptance or commitment. And so when I think about change management in an org, I actually think about all that those stages I felt as I was grieving major losses in my life. And you think about them from the perspective of your employees. They're going to feel change no matter how small you think it is. They're going to potentially deny it. They're going to resist it. Then maybe they'll explore it a little bit before they actually become committed to the real change. And so this is just a slide that I wanted to put in here because there are humans that are deeply experiencing work and all the changes. And part of change management is not just building the system, educating the people. It's thinking about these humans at their core and what do they need to be successful. So I want to touch on components of a great change plan. And so this is how I think about as my organization is navigating any change, how do I actually make this change happen? And it's less about putting together a chart, a project plan, and more about thinking about clear cases for change and who's actually being impacted. And so when I'm starting to navigate a change in my organization, these are some components I think through. I always want to know the why, not just for me as an executive, but for our employees. I want to be able to explain that why to them. There's always a part where I do stakeholder mapping, because it's not just like a one size fits all when it comes to change. If you really want to build a great change management plan, you have to bring everyone along with you. And that means certain people need different types of communication to secure their buy-in, to make sure that they're aligned, to make sure they have the talking points. The easiest breakdown of stakeholder mapping that I do is just like executive manager employee. And then I do like directly impacted, indirectly impacted. And when I'm thinking through the change plan, those are kind of the groups that I'm keeping in mind as I'm working on comms and messaging as well. There always needs to be training. Like, yes, switching an HRIS seems like super easy. Yes, just click this link and you will be able to log in and do all the things you need to do for your HRIS, like PTO. But the reality is, like, some people might need to watch a video on how to do that. Some people might need to get exact instructions on what they need to do. And I think training is one piece that we sometimes overlook. I've worked with executives that are like, oh, well, they're adults. They'll get it. And my feedback always is, no, most people don't get it. You have to explain it to them multiple times. You have to train and show them what it is they're doing. You have to help them understand that their behavior is going to change. And the last piece of change management that makes a really great plan is, how are you monitoring all of this? What metrics are you keeping up with? Are you looking at productivity dips? Or potentially, did a change you make actually impact your retention? I always say after a layoff, I read this stat somewhere and it stuck with my head. After you do a layoff as an organization, you should expect potentially 10 to 15% of like a voluntary turnover, because people will be more scared and they'll want to leave. I think with the current economic state and the job market, that's less likely now. But I think a year or two ago, when companies started doing layoffs, you would see that there were changes because people didn't want to stay there. They were scared. So that's just something to keep in mind as you're thinking about metrics and making sure that you have a great game plan ready. And a really simple framework that you can steal, this is like out there on the internet, nothing original, is this ADKAR framework. So it's awareness. Do people know what change is coming? Do people want to support this change? Do they know how to change? Do they have the ability to do it? And are they being reinforced? And this, when I'm thinking about doing a change management plan, this is how I think through like each of those journeys of those stakeholder groups that I was talking about. It's like, do these managers understand it? Do these employees understand it? Do the leaders understand it? Are the direct impacted people? And it can be a lot, but if you're even skipping one of these steps, you're potentially missing an opportunity to make the change actually stick and have really good enforcement. Ooh, I see people like to use this framework. That's so good. I love that you use it in a communication plan. Sorry, if you would like to engage, like in the chat, I will live engage with you. I really love this framework. It's super helpful when I'm writing comms, when I'm even thinking about, sometimes employees have bad reactions to changes that are happening at the org. And I always go back to this to see like, where did we miss something potentially? Because I don't think most people are just like, I hate change and I'm not going to do it. I think most people are just unclear about the change, and that builds that resistance. So we've talked a little bit about what change management is, how I think about putting together a game plan. Here's a really great and easy framework that you can steal. Um, the next thing I want to talk about is like building your change toolkit. This has saved me countless times. I have an internal comms template that I built already, but now ChatGPT would also do this for you, where I have a com for basically every single type of change we're making and like who's impacted and who's it going to. And it's a really long template. I think at this point it's like 15 pages long of all the various types of comms I've written. And that is like key in my toolkit. Like, I have to make sure I have that when I go from organization to organization. I just send the document to myself, because it's comms that I've written. But I think it's super important for any change you do. if you're thinking small to big, that you have some sort of comms template with multiple touches to the employees, either verbally or in writing. It can't just be like one mode. I always say like your comms should include multiple modes if possible. Manager FAQ at the end of any document I write, especially if it's like a big change, I'll always put a manager FAQ so that the managers understand the commonly asked questions the employees will give them. You can ask ChatGPT to write this for you. What I do is I actually like sit there and I think about what I would ask as an employee, and I write down all those questions and I do a Q&A. Training modules and micro learnings in your change toolkit, like it's good to have modules where you can build training and really easy things for people to see. Some people are visual learners. So being able to watch a video on what's changing and why with like a simple voiceover or even a loom on like how to do something simple like submit PTO can be super helpful. Um, in your change toolkit should always be some sort of feedback collection. So usually when I'm writing my comms plan and I'm building my change management big document, I always have a section for how are we collecting feedback on this? Is it anecdotal? Is it a pulse survey? Am I sending managers into one-on-one? And that's where I'm getting my feedback from. It's just such a crucial part that I think so many people forget. But if you're going through a change, you're going to want to pulse potentially before, during, and after the change to really understand what is your organization experiencing. And the last bullet here is about like new era additions. I think basically like this will be custom to your organization. If your organization is hybrid, if your organization is putting AI into everything, if your organization has an AI manifesto where everyone has to use it no matter what, that change toolkit should really reflect something that's like very relevant to your organization, specifically around how you all will do this change. Great. I do see some questions. Okay. How to measure success. Want to touch on this quickly. And by the way, at the end, I'll have time to do like 20 minutes for any questions. So if you have them, please prepare them. Like we can chit chat forever. Um, I wanted to include this slide because I feel like this is missing quite a bit from change management initiatives where people will roll out a change and then be like, ooh, I feel like the vibes are off, or the employees seem less engaged, or so and so heard this through the grapevine. I think what sets apart a good change plan from a great change plan is how are you actually measuring this change? So you need to look at things like adoption metrics. If you launched a new system, has everyone logged in? When was their last login? How frequently are they logging in? Engagement trends. Pulse surveys are super powerful here. I think you can learn a lot from how people are responding to change simply through looking at their engagement over time. Engagement is not a once in a year measure. If you're running one engagement survey, I would just give you a takeaway right now. I would consider moving to more of a pulse, iterative style engagement because change is happening so rapidly. You might go through 4 to 5 cycles of change in your organization in a year. And if you only do that one point in time engagement survey, really long, 50 questions, you might honestly get recency bias, change that wasn't captured, a lot of engagement changes that are going to be missing because you're only anchoring once a year. So I would just say, if anything, pulse your employees, pulse them regularly, make sure they like the pulses. We run an every 2 week survey, and our employees are like, these are great, keep them coming. And I'm honestly shocked, but they really love them. Productivity dips and recovery. So during any change, you will experience some change in productivity as people are acclimating to something new, as a business shifts and now new work is being done in a different way. There will be some sort of dip, but what you really want to look at is how does your organization recover from this change? If you're finding that over time, there's a lot of still resentment weeks later, a month later, that might be a very clear indicator that something did not go right there versus a productivity dip as everyone is getting used to something and then they recover quickly. I wish there was like a good way to measure this. Probably through pulse surveys, I could think of a few more ways, but this is something that I don't see many orgs have a good grip on or know how to manage. Qualitative feedback. Your managers, your ERGs, your direct line, everyone might have feelings on the change that is happening. And it is really good to get qualitative feedback from different stakeholder groups. Like my favorite example is when a leadership team thinks everything happened really well. And they're like, yeah, that was so great. We navigated that so well. We pivoted the business and everyone is on board. And then you go talk to a manager or an employee and they're like, I don't know what's going on. I'm so confused. Is my job at risk? What's happening here? And I think that disconnect can tell you so much about the success of your change management plan. Everyone at every level across your org should be aligned with what is happening, and their impression should be the same. And the last piece is attrition and retention. If you institute a major change and then see a bunch of people leaving afterwards, or you're tracking your attrition and you're doing exit interviews, and the common feedback in the exit interviews, like things are changing too much and I don't know why it's happening and I'm always confused and I didn't know if my job was safe here, go back to change management. Go back to what were the last 4 changes we made and how did we talk about them? And I think keeping these in mind, like always thinking about change, is something you can actually measure and understand where your gaps are as an organization is super powerful. Um, I want to talk a second about where this could all go wrong. I've touched on it loosely, but let's get into it. Um, Lack of clarity can create chaos. My favorite thing to do is to ask everybody, like, are you clear on what's going on? And they'll say yes. And I'll be like, okay, can you like pitch it back to me? And when they do, I like really find quickly, like, okay, they understand. But your employees now more than ever want clarity. Like, there is so much happening in the world, change, all happening so rapidly that if they don't have clarity on what's actually happening at work, it can create chaos. I have been in a meeting where someone's like, well, I don't know why we made that change, or I don't know why the business pivoted to that. And that to me is just like, you lacked clarity about what happened, and now it's going to cause chaos because I'm going to have to go back and tell your manager, talk to your leader, make sure I revisit all of our comms to better understand it. This I touched on already, leadership misalignment. If your leaders do not understand the change and why it's happening, you have a big risk on your hands. You want that group more than ever to be able to answer questions, stand by the change, and talk about the change in an eloquent manner. And if they can't, people will look to the top and say, well, they don't even know what's going on, so how could I? Um, Underestimating emotions. This is a little touchy-feely. But I think a lot of times people will say, "Oh, we're just going to change that," and like no one cares. No one uses that system, doesn't matter, no one cares, or we're going to pivot the business and it's fine, we'll explain it in a great way. I see this happen a lot with like more junior managers and leaders where they really don't understand the emotional impact of change that is happening, of someone feeling blindsided by something going on. And it's really hard for employees to come back from that. And so when you're thinking about changes, no matter how little, somebody is going to have a reaction to it. And I'll just give you an example. Think about anyone in your life, either at work or in your personal life, who deeply hates change. Imagine you like made a plan with them weeks in advance because they hate change. And you come in the 10th hour and you're like, you know what, let's do something different. How do you think they're going to react? Probably not great. Your employees feel the same way. And when you underestimate their emotions about these things, you also just don't see them. You miss the human side of change. Someone said earlier the ADKAR framework really doesn't touch on the human piece of change. I think that in your comms, like you can actually touch on the human piece of these things and understanding people's emotions and making sure that you're following up with people who you think would have more reactions around this change happening. Um, this is the end all be all. If anyone, HR people here, we all know what it's like to be left out of a strategy. I have felt it so many times in my career where at the 10th hour, someone comes in and says, oh, we should have told HR about this. And then you're left scrambling to pick up all the pieces. Like a manager tells somebody that they're going to be fired. I've truly had to handle that before. Like a leader decides that they're going to promote somebody and then comes and tells you last minute. I've also had that happen. But the part of this, of the strategy that's like most important is even the littlest changes. I think HR can add a nuance to the lens on how it gets done. And listen, I have fought tooth and nail to be involved in almost every single change our organization makes, and it's been an uphill battle. But when you have executives and you're there and you tell them, like, my job as HR is to help us all navigate this, to align us, to get us in the right direction for this change, they'll usually bring you in earlier. A lot of you, I don't know if any of you work with COOs, a lot of COOs lead change management, but I think the way that I have really dealt with this personally is I say, hey, is this going to impact the employees? And they're usually like, yeah, of course. Why are you asking this question? Then I say, then shouldn't I be there? Shouldn't we talk about what HR can add to this conversation? And usually that's when the light bulb goes off for some people. And I see someone in the chat saying IT, absolutely. IT does lead a lot of change management, especially around systems. But I do think having HR be a part of it and a partner in it is really important. And I think like there's always stakeholder management. It's not like a fight for the power. Like you don't have to be the one person leading all the change, but you need to be in the room when the change is happening. You need to be part of the discussion because then someone else can lead and we can be part of it. Um, Ooh, I went too fast. So that's a little bit about what goes wrong. And I know there are questions in the chat. I will get to them. Somebody asked, can you give another example about leadership misalignment? Sure can. I think the first one I gave was when we pivoted the strategy and the leader didn't believe in it. And then basically told the employees, like, yeah, I don't really believe in the strategy. I bet you we go back to the old way of doing it soon enough. That's like a good leadership misalignment. If you have leaders who literally don't actually understand the impact of the change and then default to saying, oh, go talk to HR about that, that's misalignment. My worst and most dramatic example is, let's say you have two co-founders of a company, and when they don't disagree on the change, but they decide to disagree and commit. And then I hate that phrase, by the way. They decide to disagree and commit, and they commit, and then the other leader is still really mad about it and continues to bring it up, and then it bleeds down into the organization. That is a really clear sign of misalignment. And I think just having people who don't understand the change, like this all comes back to one simple thing, the why. If your leaders and everyone can't tell you why, that's misalignment in itself. A little bit about HR's role at every stage. I kind of think about change management in a before, during, and after, and boy, I go through it in the during. Here's a really simple, like, screenshot this, take this. This is how I run all my playbooks, honestly. This is it. Stage one, before any major change, I'm shaping strategy. We're in the room, we're talking about, is this the right time for this change? I always love when people try to do change stuff during like holidays. One time someone was like, can we just like do that during Christmas? And I'm like, why would we do that during Christmas when everyone is out? Why would we roll out a new system 2 weeks before a holiday that shuts down our entire company? Like it just doesn't work. So I think that piece, mapping your stakeholders always before I'm mapping out those groups. I also like, this is not for everyone and you don't have to do this, but I also make a list of like detractors, people I know will have really strong reactions to the change, and I need to win over sooner rather than later. And I always have a list of my champions, the people I can go to and say, here's a change. Like, what do you think? Can you help me champion it? That is part of my stakeholder mapping. I always make sure I know who is going to require more and who might be the person to help me shout from the rooftops, this change is amazing. I identify any risks and gaps. We as HR, I think, understand risk more than anyone else. And so when we are doing a change, I always have a column called like risks, like could top talent leave if we made this change? Could our product fail and maybe we'd have to do layoffs if we made this change? I'm always game planning for the worst case scenario and then trying to identify what gaps exist. And the part of before that I think is really crucial, you cannot do this during, is you have to coach your leaders on messaging. If you give them a comms plan, like you write out all these beautiful comms and you're like, here you go, just read the script. That's just one step. Like you really want to be able to one-on-one, if possible, coach them, especially if it's a new or junior leader, on what is the messaging, because change can die in how the messaging is handled, in simply how it's delivered. It can die. Your employees are going, and I'm not belittling them by saying this, they do create fictional stories when there are gaps in what they are being told. We all do it. We all think like, ooh, something seems like it's going on here. If your messaging is not clear and delivered well, that's where change can fail. And so that is the before. You really want to coach the leaders on before, even through, if you can't do one-on-one, like record a loom of you delivering it. If you have a manager who's really junior and is like, is going to butcher this, make them get on a call and practice with you. Like truly, I have made managers do it. Like you gotta do it. And we're not the cleanup crew. We are like the pit crew. I don't know if anyone watches F1. I don't, so this is a terrible analogy, but I've watched enough in the background. We're the pit crew. We should be there in the moment, getting everything going, driving, putting our teams and making them go out and win the race. Sorry if you're an F1 fan and that was a terrible analogy. Stage two, the during. And I have like three more slides and then we'll get to the good stuff, I promise. Or, question and answer. I see you all putting questions in. During. What is our role during? We should drive comms. We should enable and support managers. This is really key. Listen for resistance. Who seems like they're not paying attention? They could be checked out. They seem to be really negative. They're not buying into it. Maybe they don't ask any questions. Like, listen for that resistance because that resistance can overturn a plan really quickly. And during the change, that's when you want to provide learning. You could tee it up before and say, here's why we're making this change with the video. And then you do the learning during the video. So during, we play a very heavy role. Um, Also, on a note on change management, if I know we are changing anything, little or small, I always look at my calendar for other HR things that are going on. Like, let's say we're launching, change management is like launching a new initiative. Let's say it's a big holiday week or weekend. Let's say people are filling out reviews. Those are not times to be launching anything new. And so that is just a key on the during. You want to make sure that not too many things are going on so that people can actually grasp the change. And the after, you always want to measure. We had that whole slide on measuring. You want to capture lessons learned, tongue twister. Um, Not every change goes well. Not every change I've navigated has gone well. People have feedback. And that's really good. If you keep that feedback loop open, people will come to you and tell you how you can do something better. And listen, I get it. It is annoying to constantly hear from people on how your work is going, but there can be really good lessons learned if you keep that feedback loop going. Make sure you're reinforcing new behaviors in all hands, all staff comms, weekly updates, whatever touch point you have with the employees, reinforcing new behaviors in celebration ways will be really great. And make sure you celebrate those wins. Okay. Um, we have a mini workshop prompt, but I think we might actually have questions that I can get to instead. And we're coming up on time, I think. So I want to be mindful of time. I might just move past this, but maybe do this as a takeaway. I'm going to give you homework. I think I was a teacher in another life because there are a few other things I want to get to. Um, Quick wins to try next week. Just 5 things I want you to try over the course of the week. So one each day. Review all your change comms through the lens from HR. Like think about, is the employee getting everything they need to know? Run a feedback session with your managers. Wild for me to ask you to do this, but even doing a simple 15-minute feedback session with them on how do you think we handle change, or what do you think we could be doing better to help navigate things that are happening at the organization could be really helpful. Add a pulse check to your however to you're talking to the employees, however you're pulsing them. You could do one question on change. We do 3 questions every 2 weeks. We have 3 questions at like the company level and then 3 questions towards the manager level. And we actually touch on change in both of those. When in our manager one, we ask like my manager communicates changes from the leadership team effectively. I can also share the 6 questions we ask if you find me on LinkedIn. But we ask those every 2 weeks. And we try to get a sense of change from an organizational level and change from a manager level because it is so multifaceted. Meet with your product and ops teams on any upcoming changes. I think like feature changes, tech changes, all of that stuff is really interesting to watch navigate. And then start documenting what success could look like. In your ideal world, if you could roll out any change, something as simple as a system change, even a manager change, maybe a new initiative, maybe you're moving to twice a year performance reviews. Think about some sort of example of what you want to change at your organization and start documenting what success could look like. What in the ideal world after you make this change could your life look like? Okay. James has been putting info about a giveaway, but WorkVivo is doing a really fun giveaway. If you're feeling fired up and you want to tag us on LinkedIn, me and WorkVivo, and write down like your favorite thing that you learned from this, hopefully you learned something, they'll pick a winner to win $100 Visa gift card so that you can buy yourself something. So you just have to post a pic, please not of me right now because I look very scared, but any sort of picture you want with what you learned from this. And I hope you're really enjoying this. Cool. Don't forget the giveaway. Q&A. I really want to get to this. I have two more slides after, but I really want to get to some questions because I think like really great stuff happens in the questions. So we have a question. When managing change, we tend to have early adopters, the movable middle, and the highly resistant few. Beyond managing individual changes, do you have a general or proactive strategy or recommendation for increasing the numbers and influence of early adopters and movable middle and decrease the number and influence of the highly resistant few? What an excellent question and beautifully written. This is the truth. You have the early adopters, the movable middle, and the highly resistant. And so the question is really about how do you move people more to the early adopters and movable middle? Um, a strategy I've used that works really well is like a focus group. And this can be very overwhelming if your organization is large or you're not interested in taking feedback. But before I make a change at an organization, I usually know if the change is going to be like everyone's going to be really excited about it or not a lot of people are going to be bought in. And what I go do is I then try to like preview this change with a few groups. I'll identify people, especially the movable middle, to get them to be early adopters. And I'll go to them and say, hey, I really want to do a focus group about this change. Would you guys be interested in joining? And they usually join and I pitch them the change. I'm like, what do you all think? This simple exercise of getting people to feel like they have a say secures buy-in faster than anything I've probably ever witnessed at an organization. Simply by asking them and making them feel like they have a voice, it is really easy to get them to be those early adopters. And then if you make a change and you decide it was against everything they were saying, even going back to that group and saying, hey, I know all of you felt that this was like not a great change. Like, let me talk about why we're going to do this. And hopefully I can like get your buy-in by the end of this. So bringing them along on that journey can really help that change, move them from like the middle to the early adopters. I have found that like most people at work just want to be heard and they feel like they're not heard. And if they have the ability to express themselves about something you're doing, that then secures the buy-in and the trust with them. Minda Harts has a great book. It should be out at the end of July. She just joined me on my podcast this last week, and she wrote a book about organizational trust and how to build it. And I highly recommend you read it because it tells you so much. She includes so many examples for HR. It tells you so much about how you can actually build that trust. And that trust is the actual key to getting to everyone to move to early adopters. The name of the book is called, oh my gosh, I can't remember. It's the set, it has a really good name. I think it's Talk Nice to Me. She always makes each of her books with a lyric title. But I can also include it in an email, or if you follow me on LinkedIn, I'll be sharing it. Minda Harts is her name. She's great. Okay, more questions. And if that didn't answer your question, like let me know. I think influencing talents, if you are a Gallup strength finding person, Gallup strength finders person, if you lead with your influencing talents, I think change management becomes a little bit easier. I lead with influencing, so I'm always trying to like sprinkle in buy-in with everyone. But I do believe if you work on organizational trust and you bring people in earlier and reinforce that they have a voice, you can really increase your adopters. Okay, next question. What about when a leader changes their mind the next day? Oof. Meaning their decision making is inconsistent. The feelings are related on one day, change course by the next day, and changes the course of the decision. Listen to me when I say this from the bottom of my heart. I'm so sorry if you're experiencing this. I once worked with a CEO who was a terrible decision maker. We would go into a meeting one day at 2 p.m. We'd make a whole decision. I'd build a whole plan. We'd be so aligned. He would go talk to one of the early employees, and the next day would come back to me and be like, I don't think we should do that anymore. Or he would read a book and then come back to me and be like, I don't really think that's how we should do talent strategy. And it was infuriating, like truly one of the most infuriating and demoralizing experiences of my life. It made me doubt all of my abilities as a leader because I couldn't figure out what it was going on to get him to agree to something. And so, how I dealt with this was when we would make a decision, I would say, hey, is this decision set in stone or are we still soliciting feedback? He would say, I'm still maybe thinking about it. And I always say, great, I'm not going to build the plan until you go solicit that feedback. Go get that feedback, come back to me, and we'll talk about it. And it was an exercise in honestly patience for me and trust building for him. And I'm not really quite sure we ever got to fully trusting one another because he would still make a decision and change his mind. And I think that is a really big leadership red flag and a hardship for HR. And so when I knew that he was going to go change his mind, what I did was I went and found my persuaders across the organization that he would listen to. He loved listening to the CFO. So I would go to the CFO. He and I were very aligned. I would pitch him on my idea. I would say, I know he's going to talk to you about this. Can you make sure I have your support in the conversation? So if you know that they're changing their mind constantly on you, go find your advocates across the organization. Make sure your advocates are aligned with the plan as well. And so when they go talk to them, sorry, I've been using he because my CEO was a he. When they go talk to them, then they're hearing the story from other people as well. It really drove me absolutely bonkers mad that this person could not commit to a change. And so, really, when I went and found my advocates that were also aligned with me, it was a life changer for me. Also, asking that question, is this decision set in stone or are we changing our minds? And the last piece of this, back to Minda Hart's book about trust. If you do not have trust with the leader, I think it's really easy for them to change their mind. So think about, what can I do to build trust with this person so that they know I'm going to make the best decision for them. I hope that helps. Also, reach out to me if you're dealing with that because I very rarely did and it was a struggle. So I'm here for you. Um, Someone asked a question: what guiding principles do you have for changes that are happening to people, not with people? AKA, it will never be perceived as good. I think a key example of this is like a layoff. I had to navigate one of these about 2 years ago, and we said goodbye to like really great people, but we had to make a shift in our business strategy, and that meant laying off some folks. And it happened to people, right? They didn't have a say. It had to happen. I think how you handle comms in the before, the during, and the after become incredibly important here. Who's delivering the message? Are they delivering it with a lot of empathy? Are they being kind? Are they creating space to deliver that message in a way that it's received? Once that change has happened to that person, how are you talking about that change with others? There's a piece of empathy that I think, having empathy for people and having like high EQ, that I think is missing during change management, is a lot of times we think about when the change is happening to the person and only to that person. But there's also a piece of it of, how are we talking about it after? Are we celebrating that person? Are we saying this was a change that had to be made? Are we saying they didn't have a say? What are we actually saying? And that's why, like, I think a really good example is, let's say you're terminating somebody for cause performance. You're gonna deliver that feedback to them as the most empathetic way possible. They have just lost their job for performance, but it was performance based, but they still lost their job, lost their livelihood. You deliver that, and then you go and tell the organization or the team that that person is no longer here. Do you say something like, oh, well, they were just bad at their job, so we fired them? Or do you say, hey, we had to part ways with this person. We don't think the role was a good fit for them. We wish them all the best and success in their career, but ultimately we didn't think this was a place that could be successful. Those are two different messages. And seeing, like, when it happens to the person and then everyone remaining, seeing how that person is treated, I think really helps people understand where they stand with HR and leaders. Somebody asked, how do we deliver a termination that's too difficult when you think the person is good, but the management doesn't see it that way? That one is really hard. It's my least favorite type of termination. How I deal with that one is I make sure that the leader, before management can even consider terminating the person, they have to give that feedback. They have to give them feedback regularly, and they have to document that what the feedback they were giving them, they did not improve upon before they actually moved to termination. And I think this is the hard part where like HR kind of gets the rep about being there for the business, because we have to then navigate this termination even if we don't think it's a good idea. But it's what the manager wants, and ultimately sometimes the manager gets to make that decision. And I think how you handle it is when you're doing the comms, you make the manager do the termination. This might be a hot take. Maybe you all will disagree with me. When we do terminations, I am on the call as HR to share HR, but the manager also must speak and tell the employee that they are being terminated. And I think then, even when I disagree, at least the manager was accountable for making that communication. And I wasn't the person who had to do it because I didn't agree with it. It wasn't my choice, ultimately. But I think before you even get to that termination, there needs to be documented regular feedback in written and verbal. And you make sure that the manager is doing it. Nobody can fire anybody at my organization unless the manager has had several conversations with the employee. And I also spend one-on-one time with the manager asking them about how they're managing. So I hope that answers your question. Okay. Somebody said and I have 9 more minutes. I'm going to keep taking questions, y'all. With these massive workforce changes driven by AI, there seem to be two camps from a comms and a change management perspective for the org. One, be a straight shooter like I can never say that, and Amazon, and say that huge changes and job losses are coming, or two, wait and see. And I don't mean to be too glib about number two. A lot of organizations really don't know how this will shake out. I'm curious about what some of your change management strategy looks like when the full picture isn't clear or can't be truly known. Love that last line. You tell your employees, we don't know the full picture. That is scary in a gray area. So how I would manage it from a comms perspective. And to be clear, I'm not a comms professional. There are lots of people who this is their professional job, who they are excellent at this. But I will tell you how I have done this in our organization. We tell our employees when we don't know the exact impact. We say, hey, here are the facts we're looking at. We're looking at all of these things, but we don't really know how this is going to impact our business. We have an idea. And the more idea that we have, we're going to share with you on our path and on this journey to what this actually looks like. I mean, we are a content company. AI is disrupting content. And so we have been having this conversation regularly in many informal ways with our organization. My CEO loves AI, but he would never write an AI manifesto. In fact, when all those people started writing AI manifestos, he came to me and said, I will not be a CEO who writes an AI manifesto, but I think you could help guide our AI strategy as an organization. What do you think? And I said, wow, one, thank you for not writing a manifesto. Two, would love to do it. And our strategy has been we're demystifying AI just as a concept. How are we using it? We've been doing little lunch and learns. We actually have one going on right now with our employees on how to use AI. And even in every one of those sessions, we're trying to figure out use cases for specific teams and then talking about them. We have leaders who present on it. We keep doing that every Sunday. Like my CEO sends an email, and that's where he'll write about like his thoughts about AI. And then we talk about potentially including it in our all hands, doing like a AI spotlight. How are people using AI at the organization? But I think the fact is like none of us have a crystal ball. None of us know what the future is going to hold unless you've figured out time travel. Would love to hear more. None of us know that. And so I think the best case with your employees is they're also reading that news. They know what's going on. They know what's being said, acknowledging it straight on as an organization, and even saying like, hey, we know you all are reading the news, like we're thinking about how this will impact our business. The second we have more information, we will come to you all. We're monitoring this, like, and we're thinking about how this is going to shape our product, our offerings, and all of y'all's roles too. Part of AI strategy is just being really clear with people. And I have read the articles, like people are scared. The articles from Amazon, like it is scaring people. It is scaring your employees. If you don't think it is, it already is. And so I think being honest about you don't know and you're figuring it out, and your job as a leadership team will be to give updates the second you can. I don't know what camp I'm in on the comms, by the way. Last question. In a multi-level organization, when you are not the change maker, but you are responsible for managing change in your org, how do you navigate a why that isn't there? Example, bringing people back to the office for an office move, and the why isn't provided by the change maker. You're experiencing a scenario that a lot of my good friends in HR are in, where the CEO decides everyone has to be in the office, either because they are locked into a 13-year lease and they can't get out of it, or because everyone is going back to the office and that's just what's being done. and you have to be the person to communicate it. I think there's a why in everything, and you have to find it. And you have to ask, like the person making the change, can you tell me why? In order for our employees to connect to this, there needs to be a why. Here's the flip side and red flag I will caveat this advice with. The return to office one is a very specifically interesting one because a lot of people's why is that engagement and productivity will be better in the office. And all of the studies actually show that the opposite is true. So that is a really tough one. And I could go either way. I could go super transparent and tell our employees, you're coming back to the office because we invested a lot of money in this office space and we really want to make sure it gets used. Or you could say, we're coming back to the office because we have found connection is just really hard for us as an organization digitally. So we want everyone back in the office to make that easier. Everyone might have an issue with your why. Your why might be your why, and listen, not everyone has to agree with it, but it has to be explained. That's, I think, the part that we get tripped up on a lot. We want the why to be something that like we all align with too. And sometimes the why is not something that we all align with, but a reason why we're doing the thing that we're doing. For HR people who are dealing with this, I feel you. So many people have come to me to ask about this, and it is really hard to feel like change is not your choice. And I think as much as possible that you're able to communicate the why in everything that you do and have clear line of sight to the impacts that this will cause can be really helpful and like reassuring. Ultimately, I mean, my CEO and I have a really funny Venn diagram. How I describe it is like we are a Venn diagram relationship. There are things we always align on, and there are things we don't. And we're really honest with one another when it's a thing we don't align on. Like we know that we don't have opposite views on return to office. We're a fully remote org. We would probably never go back to the office, but my CEO loves working in the office because he doesn't want to be distracted. But I love working remote. So we always call it our Venn diagram. So if you are in HR and you're working with the CEO, think about your Venn diagram. What do you all align on in the middle and what are the outside things? And then think about why the differences you have on the outside, why they exist. That was the last question, and we have 3 minutes left. Um, this was so fun. Thank you all for having me. Thank you for letting me ramble about a topic I'm deeply passionate about, change management. I will leave us with two things, some key takeaways. Change is not a project. It sometimes can feel like it. It's actually a people process. Think about it. Tell every single leader you know it is a people process. A strong change plan has three features: your messaging, your support, and how you measure it. And the last piece is change is constant. It is always going to happen. We are living in unprecedented times for the unprecedented future. That was a bad joke. AI, hybrid work, and shifting expectations have made it that way, and I think it is going to continue for the foreseeable future. So if you feel like everything is chaos in your organization, take a step back and think about why, and think about the role that change management can play in mitigating some of that chaos. Thank you, thank you, thank you for letting me yap about this. I love change management. Find me on LinkedIn. I will be there to talk more about it. I post about it all the time. And big, huge thanks to WorkVivo for giving me the platform to talk to all of you all and hopefully make your organizations a little bit better every day. Here's to hoping. I see you all and thank you for the hard work you do. Thanks, all.